Welcome to another episode of Ralph's Kitchen. Today we're going to be cooking a pot roast. Now, a pot roast is done in a pot, not in the oven. So today I'm going to show you how to do a pot roast in a non-conventional way. Now for a pot roast, there's no special ingredients. We're just going to be using a pot, some oil, and a lump of meat. Today we're using topside. Okay, let's go. Now this is a piece of topside. This is approximately 1.1 kilo. Normally I like to use a little bit bigger piece, but it's very important to pick your piece of meat carefully for pot roast. What I always look for is the grain. Now you can see the grain, the meat going this way. So what you ideally want is the grain to go along the length of the meat, or at least in that direction. So this is a reasonably good piece of meat. The trick is to use a adequately sized saucepan, or a pot in this case, and I'm using, I think it's a 7-litre pot. Now I'm putting a little bit of rice bran oil in here. I find the rice bran oil has a higher flash point, which means it gets hotter a lot quicker, it doesn't smoke as much, and is really clean to work with. So I'm adding a little bit of oil, just enough to cover the bottom, and the magic is actually in the browning of the meat. That's where the flavour comes from, the browning. So this is where the magic begins. The oil is now nice and hot, and the meat's about to go in. Probably hear this sizzling away at the moment. We will keep this sizzling probably for about 15 minutes, then we'll turn it. So we'll come back in a minute. I've just come to realise that I forgot to mention earlier that if you do have a multi-cooker or a large saucepan like this for a pot roast, it's ideal if you have a lid with little vent holes like this. And if you don't have a lid with vent holes, what I like to suggest is you lift the lid on one end and put a little spoon or something in, just to lift the edge off, and that prevents all the spray from coming out. So this is a 1.1 kilo of meat approximately. Now I expect this whole process for the meat to be about 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on how tender you like the meat. Nice and brown, and that's where the flavour comes from. So what we're going to be doing is rotating it a little bit now. We're going to try and brown all the sides as equally as possible. Now this is sizzling away again. Now what I've done is I've just turned the heat down a little bit so we can actually hear over the top of the sizzling. But it's important to remember that this needs to be turned frequently, and you need to also be careful with the oil splatter, because every time you lift the lid, moisture drops in, and moisture and oil doesn't mix and it will splatter. So while the meat is sizzling and browning, I'm just about to prepare some mushrooms, finely sliced, capsicum, finely sliced, and some, probably half a carrot, that's going to be finely sliced. Now it's been approximately half an hour now. I've turned it a few times, and as you can see, it's browning nicely. Now the next part of the magic is we need to add some water, because we no longer want this to keep browning, we now want it to cook. So we add some water, and now I've put this on low heat now, and the idea is to simmer this. So the water should be boiling very slowly and creating a steam environment. So the meat, in theory, will now cook under steam, and it will also dissolve all that flavouring from the browning that we had occur before. You need to check on the meat regularly, because the water will evaporate and you will need to top it up. So always keep a little bit of water down here, and stops the meat from burning and drying out. So it's been over 2 hours now and the meat's still simmering and browning and cooking. So how can you tell when the meat's cooked? Well, it usually shrinks by about a third and swells by about a quarter as it's beginning to cook. So at this point in time, it should be ideally cooked. However, I will continue to cook it a little bit longer, but as it's cooking, I will now prepare the gravy. I generally like to use the roast meat gravy from Gravox. So I'll use approximately 3 tablespoons mixed with a bit of water and a sprinkle of chili powder and mixed herbs, as you can see in the background. So we're at this point where we now add the extra gravy mix that I've prepared, and we add that in, and I've put the chili powder and the mixed herbs already in. Now this will give us a very rich, wholesome flavour. Now we also add the mushrooms, the capsicum, and we'll add a little bit of extra water. And then we turn up the heat again and we simmer this down probably for another half hour. But I can tell you what, that aroma, that rich meaty aroma is already coming through right now. And any of you who really enjoy a roast meat project, this is the one to do it because it has all flavour. I like to take out the meat, slice it, and then put the slices back in the gravy and leave it to sit probably for another hour as it's cooling a little bit. So let's have a look. And all that flavour will just come out. So come back in a little while to check. Now it's been about 2.5 hours. I've taken the heat off. It's now cooling down, and if you have a look, this gravy and the meat has developed in a nice rich brown texture. So I've just taken out a little piece of meat. I'm going to cut that up and just to sample it, see how this piece of meat is. Now I can already smell the aroma is overwhelmingly nice. Oh, it's nice. Now if you're a roast meat fan, this is a piece of roast meat that you'll be delighted with. I'm not saying it's great because I cooked it. I'm not saying it's fantastic because it came out of this pot. It's great, it's fantastic. And every good roast beef you have to enjoy with a good cappuccino with, you got it, extra head. Thanks for watching. See you next time. And this is what it's all about. A nice juicy piece of roast beef with the gravy and some vegetables. Well, I hope you enjoyed it and hope yours works out just as well. It's not a roast that you probably find for recipes in the oven. So a pot roast is done in a pot, not in the oven. Nice. It's not whatever the word is. What's that word? Welcome to another episode of Ralph's Kitchen. Today we're going to be cooking pot roast. Cooking pot roast. Cooking pot roast. Cooking pot roast. Already see it's discoloring, or browning I should say. So we're back a few minutes later now. When I say a few minutes, I probably mean about 15 minutes. Now the meat. Then I'm going to put my meat in here and probably brown this on all sides as much as possible so it's very brown. So we're going to cut this up now and we'll have a look what this is going to be tasting like. So tender already. Now, I know what you're thinking. He's going to taste it. He's going to say it's awesome, delicious, and I can already smell it's fantastic. But let's confirm that it's fantastic. Smell. Oh, tender. Look at the knife. Bloody hell. Problem is, there's not enough. This kind of roast meat, you want a big piece. And as you can see, that gravy is really rich and dark. You don't even have to use mushrooms or capsicums. This is good by itself. And a lot of people traditionally will just bake this in the oven, but this gives you a whole different finish.